Hi, hello, welcome to another video. Once again, I'm going to be going down a little rabbit hole or side street that we've sort of already passed in a previous video. Some of these might be repeats, but I like kind of going a little deeper in each direction. And so today we're talking about the concept of novelty, attention, and memory. We already talked about the idea that maybe this generation is going to have more memories of things other people experienced than forming actual memories of their own, which is kind of terrifying. But something that I kind of want to talk about today is the idea that we are not really creating as many memories, especially if we're kind of abusing short form. If we doom scroll a little more than we'd like, we are literally stopping our brain from being able to process, record, and keep memories like our brain is supposed to. And so I made a list of what I'm hoping to cover in this video, which is number one, talking about how we perceive time and how we can affect how long or short our days feel. Number two, why we get sucked into scrolling. And then number three, how can we replace that feeling with something else, finding healthier sources of dopamine in our days. But then number four, even surpassing novelty, talking about fixing our attention and relying less on these kind of like dopamine-filled new sparkly experiences. And finally, number five, just how do we get our attention back? How does intention play a role in that? And how can we learn to be more present in our lives? How we can remember more details, and not just because those details are captured on a phone. I found that sometimes I remember parts of my trip only because I recorded it, whereas I have friends that don't take any pictures of their trips and they can remember even more than I did. And I really want to get to the bottom of why. So welcome to the video. Please grab a snack or a glass of water. Have you had water today? Divas, thank you. And just thank you as always for being here. And just while I still have your attention, I want to give you a kind of actionable item like I did in the previous videos. And it's not as easy as just like quit social media, get off of it, because I mean, it's literally my job. For most people nowadays, we have some kind of social media component to our professions. I use it to keep in touch with my loved ones, etc. Like quitting it cold turkey is maybe not the answer for most of us, but there are ways that we can get our attention span back, along with intentionally carving out time to not be on my phone. One thing that has helped me for years now is the wonderful sponsor of this video, which is Headspace. Headspace is a mental health app. You probably know it because of their wonderful guided meditations, but they offer so many different resources on the app, whether it is getting into meditation or stress management, breathing exercises. They have podcasts and advice from people within mental health fields. It helps you build healthy habits in case you need a little bit of like gamification to help you form a routine. I love to use it for helping with my sleep. They have wonderful soundscapes and things like that. And just 10 days of using Headspace has proven to reduce stress levels. It absolutely improves your mental health, your attention span, your ability to focus. Learning ways to quiet your mind, even for like 5 minutes, does absolute wonders for your attention span. I will have a link and a QR code, and you can use it to try Headspace for 60 days for free. It's great for absolute beginners. They also have wonderful guided exercises for really specific things. So if you're dealing with the loss of a loved one, if you're dealing with lack of confidence in the workplace, things like that, it can really help you manage your stress, your confidence, your just general mental health. So thank you so much, as always, to Headspace. Once again, please check my QR code and my link in the description box. That is such an easy, actionable way, proven for like hundreds of years, okay? Try to quiet your mind just a little bit. Your brain will thank you. So recently I became quite fascinated with our perception of time and what factors can change that, how time flies or the day got away from us. And I grew up flying across the country from California to New Jersey with just my MP3 player and a window seat and one shared movie for the entire airplane. I feel like we don't talk about that enough as a culture. So I grew up with that kind of attention span where I wouldn't be bored losing my mind on a 4 to 6 hour flight. And nowadays we have people who can't sit through a movie in a theater because that's too long to go without another kind of distraction. So our attention span, our concept of time, and our memory is all connected, and I kind of want to talk about the things I've learned about that. This is sort of just a jumping off point, really. I find memory to be so fascinating. The fact that when you think about a memory, it changes. Like if you are constantly going over an instance that happened to you, your brain is changing it. So interesting. So truly this is bare bones. But let's talk about her, my friend, my foe, my memory. If you are feeling like life is blurring together lately, that's because it is for your brain. I'm sure we've all experienced how scrolling on social media, time can go by so much faster than if you are like staring at a wall or twiddling your thumbs. So not only does social media, and specifically I'm talking about short form content, not only does that change your concept of time, but it actually changes how you remember it, or more importantly, how you don't. Reading from my notes, in a 2017 paper, researchers from the University of Kent's School of Psychology confirms this. Users severely underestimate the amount of time that they spend. What is self-reported as 10 minutes can easily be 30 and 40 minutes in reality. So at first I thought that this was because of the novelty effect, which is something we're going to talk about in a later section, but like how new experiences make time feel fresh and exciting and new, and so that's why time flies. While technically, yes, that's true, it's also because social media disrupts our memory. It disrupts how we record life. So, how is memory recorded? We experience life through our senses, whether that is sight, hearing, touch, taste, etc. Those experiences are then encoded into our brain, and our brain will decide if those go into short or long, conscious or unconscious memory. And while this happens at a mind-boggling pace, this isn't instantaneous. Your brain needs a second to record these memories. I mentioned this article in a previous video about brain rot, but I'm going to return to it because I find it quite fascinating. Essentially, the brain needs to process an event to store it as a memory. This act of recording a memory is called memory consolidation. If you mess with that time, your memories are also going to be messed with. So the example in this article is going to a concert, right? You go to a concert, you have this experience, it's amazing. But let's say you got really lucky, you got tickets to night number 2 of the same concert. You will then kind of be messing with the memories of the first concert. Your brain might struggle to separate exactly like, oh, this happened on night 1, this happened on night 2. And that is called proactive interference. It's sort of like if your roommate tells you like, oh, you're going to the grocery store, could you pick up eggs, milk, and flour for me? And you're like, yeah, totally, sure, I got it. And then as you're walking out the door, they scream, oh my God, I need green beans. You are more likely to forget one of those things because your roommate just asked you to tack on another memory to the things that you were already trying to remember. Not a perfect example, but you get it. And so short form content is really guilty of this because it shows us so many new things over and over again that our brains don't have any time to record what just happened. It also is shown to have an effect on something called prospective memory. So that is remembering that you have some kind of goal, right? Whenever you go to the kitchen, you open the fridge and you're like, what was I looking for? That was your prospective memory failing. Another example is if I pick up my phone to look up the map for the restaurant and instead my friend DMs me a meme and I scroll a little bit and then I'm like, oh, what was I looking for? You know, I'm gonna link a video and maybe even show you a little clip of it right here because it's so interesting. It's by the YouTube channel called Howtown and it's called What the Actual Science Says About Brain Rot. And they actually follow a couple of different studies that people are doing about specifically short form and memory. And I will reference it a couple more times in this video.
A lab in Munich did something that I've been wanting to see. They gave 60 people a cognitive test, then sent them away for a 10-minute break, and then tested them again. Now, the difference was the break. Some people just sat there, some scrolled on Twitter, some watched a normal YouTube video, and some went on TikTok. So whose brain changed during that time? This is one of the few experiments that I've been able to dig up that has actually tested the idea of brain rot.
So now that we have an introduction into memory and time perception, what are we going to do about it? I'm going to break it up into talking about novelty and dopamine, and then talking about attention and focus. Okay, let's talk about novelty, the concept of something being new to you. We often hear people talk about like, oh, starting a new chapter of my life.
Goodbye home, hello Rome.
And sometimes that feels a little too woo-woo, a little too main character, but it's actually pretty true. Our memories like to record things episodically. When we think back to our childhood, when we're trying to maybe tell our life story to someone, we often construct our life story based on these little chapters, right? Otherwise, your past would just be chaos. So when we're constantly like scrolling and looking for something new, it does this weird two-pronged thing where it gives us a new, interesting, shiny thing, which is the novelty, which is the kind of dopamine hit. But then we also move on to the next thing so quickly. We're living these like tiny, tiny, tiny micro experiences, and our brain is just like, you have brought me an absolute mess. What am I supposed to do with this shit? So this ends up warping time, not to mention our emotions, which is a whole nother rabbit hole to go down. None of this is built for how our brain processes emotions and time. In one of the studies I mentioned, it talks about how short form content, and we're specifically talking like short form video content, right? It says that it has deep implications for the psychology of time perception, since novelty, something new happening in your life, is the yardstick through which our brain measures how fast or slow time is moving. In a very real sense, the media we consume determines how fast we feel time. That's why I feel like so many of us turn to social media like when we're waiting for the bus. That's actually one of the first things that I did to really get away from the like brain off scrolling, is I very intentionally did not pick up my phone when I was just waiting for something. When I knew it was a time filler, I have tried my best to stop doing that. But it's so tempting to do, because if you're just sitting on the bench watching cars go by, time moves a lot slower than if you're just like scrolling, literally erasing time, pressing fast forward, and then bam, your bus is here, which is actually really scary to think about, how we're like shortening our lives almost, but let's not get into that. That being said, before I become like a fearmonger, most of the studies that I'm referencing are very clear that they are just the beginning of this kind of research. If you think about how long short form content has been around and the amount of like test subjects you could possibly have, the pools of test subjects are small, and they're honestly figuring out like how to test short form content, and how do you test memory? How does it affect long-term versus short? Anyway, none of this is set in stone. And also, with an interview with NBC News, a neuropsychologist from Vanderbilt University Medical Center named James Jackson, he said that, you know, there's a long history of people crusading against new technologies, right? Anything new is scary. I don't want to sound like that grandma, but
I do have a lot of skepticism whenever there's a claim that like some new thing is fundamentally changing the way that humans operate.
Yeah. Apparently Socrates thought that writing was going to ruin our minds. And, you know, people
Right.
worried about novels being addictive and the telegraph and all of that.
he says that he actually believes many of the concerns are justified. Current research on the topic, he said, suggests that short-form video broadly seems to have harmful effects on the brain when it's consumed in large doses. But it will take much more research to parse the nuances, such as who's the most vulnerable, how permanent the effects are, and which particular mechanisms cause harm. What's important, he said, is there are people that engage with short-form videos in ways that are value-added, for sure. But if their engagement is pulling them away from other more healthy opportunities, if it's isolating them from other people, if it's creating situations where they're less and less likely to just sit around and be bored, I think that's the problem.
Probably the most common questions we get at Headspace is how to deal with technology. Let's just take the phone as one example. Doesn't matter what the device is. It's an inanimate object. Piece of glass, a piece of plastic. It isn't the cause of stress. It isn't the thing that makes us feel overwhelmed. Our relationship with that thing, our reaction to the things that come through that device, that's the thing that's the cause of stress.
So watching some heated rivalry edits, not gonna hurt you. In fact, it might heal you. That's a story for another time.
I'm gonna ask you, Hollander, will you come to my cottage this summer?
But you can get pulled into scrolling for too long very easily. And that's because of our dear friend, someone you probably know very well and are sick of hearing about, dopamine. In the video I referenced about brain rot, they talked about these leaked conversations between kind of the executives of social media companies, and one of the quotes made me so angry because the people who make these apps do not give a shit about the people who use them. And this one quote says, TikTok's success can largely be attributed to strong out-of-the-box personalization and automation, which limits user agency. They know that they've created something that's very addictive, and the user doesn't have to do anything.
I'll be honest, my jaw was on the floor reading some of this.
The document showed TikTok employees openly grappling with the potential harm of the bold glamour filter. They admitted that those screen time reminders were a good talking point, but not altogether effective.
The brain rot video explained it through a really cool metaphor, which was a restaurant, right? Normally we go to a restaurant, read a menu, pick out what we want, and it is delivered to us. The way that TikTok does it is you come in, there is no menu, you sit down, and they just feed you bite-sized bits of things they think you might like, and then like adjust what they're feeding you based on your reaction. But it's okay if you don't like or you love something, because it's still just a bite. It doesn't work if they were to feed you like, here is a full serving of this. It only works when it is bite-sized content. And that is undeniably addictive, especially when you're like tired. I've talked about it before, that scrolling is not resting, but there's like a piece of us that thinks like, oh, I'm so tired, I don't want to do anything, I just want to watch something that will make me feel something. TikTok or Reels will do it. So how can we train our brain to find dopamine in healthier, less addictive places? Because remember, social media is still okay, short form content is still okay, everything in moderation though, right? And for some people, it's really hard to moderate. How can we get that novelty or that feeling from dopamine in a way that makes us have a much healthier relationship with time? Picture this. It's Thursday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You got up at the same time. You walk to work the same way. You have the same nightly routine, repeat, repeat, repeat. Your brain, like we talked about, it loves to record things as episodes. It loves to have a time marker. But when your life kind of starts to resemble Groundhog Day, your brain is like, okay, well, I remembered Monday. So just like how that new shiny Hope Core video got on your feed and changed how you perceive time, you can also get that feeling somewhat through changing the way that you walk to work, doing something different after school, maybe not going straight home from work like you usually do, things like that. You can introduce novelty into your life in a way that isn't watching like 100 videos per minute. So let's say your morning walk is exactly the same every morning. It's me. My morning walk is the same. It has been for years. Almost every day, rain or shine, I was walking the same route for about 5 years. Then I moved. Even though the route was actually pretty similar because I didn't move that far, there was enough of a difference that it felt so new to me. The walk felt a little bit longer, and I started to notice things that I hadn't otherwise. Even when I was on the same path that I usually walk on, like I had never noticed how, oh, the sun hits that particular building in a really interesting way. It wasn't that my experience actually changed, because like I said, 90% of that walk was the same, but it was the fact that my brain decided to notice more again. And so it made something usual feel new. And so in terms of novelty, it can usually be categorized into two different things. Contextual novelty, which refers to, quote, the concept where the setting or surrounding information of a stimulus is new or unfamiliar, even if the stimulus itself might be known. So, coffee in a new coffee shop, all the things she said in a Montreal dance club. Then there is something called absolute novelty, which is when the object or the stimulus is totally new. You've never had boba? Brand new experience for you.
When distractions arise, know that it's normal and gently return your focus to the breath.
They actually affect the way that that particular memory forms in your brain, but just for the context of this video, just know that it gives your brain something new to latch on to and makes your day feel a little bit less like this colorless repetition. But if you want to double dip on those good feelings, how about you get out your calendar and you schedule your novelty boosts. Your brain actually loves anticipation for something you're looking forward to. If you have something you're dreading in your future, we're not talking about that. If you have something fun, something exciting on your schedule, that kind of anticipation is really good for your brain. It gives you, I talk about this all the time, where it's like, if I don't have some kind of trip or event in my future, the horizon looks bleak. So I always try to have something, whether it's just getting dinner with friends or whether it is planning my summer vacation in the middle of January. Try to schedule your new shiny activity ahead of time. So maybe the first week of every month you try a new coffee shop. I'm gonna be referencing coffee shops all the time because like that's literally the only thing that I do during the day now is I get coffee, I walk, and I read. So maybe you schedule having your friend over for dinner for the Wednesday in the middle of the month where all hope is lost. Or I also talked in a previous video about the importance of like creating an event and having a theme, even if it's just for yourself. So maybe you schedule a movie night with yourself where you watch a foreign film and you eat the same food that is of that country. It's something new in your life, but it isn't like a new sight, sound, joke, emotion every 15 seconds. You aren't overstimulated, you are just the right amount of stimulated. And this also isn't something you need to spend money on. If you normally walk to the right coming out of your apartment, go to the left for a little bit, or maybe you usually take the subway, try to take the bus, or you always sit in this one room to study in the library, sit at a different desk. Just trying to make a little bit of a change can really help you start to see things in a different light, start to notice things more. And as we'll talk about in the next section with attention, it will change the way that you experience time for the better. And that kind of leads me to a callback. I already talked about this video, but I really love it. It is Kurt Vonnegut talking about how we are on Earth to fart around. And just the idea that yeah, you could order something online, order your groceries to be delivered, but what if you went to the grocery store yourself? And sure, it was annoying to go outside in the cold and you had to carry your bags and it was kind of abysmal outside, but maybe you saw your neighbors and you said hi and you struck up a conversation with someone, or even just like saw a cute dog on the street. Life is really about these tiny moments and tiny connections. And so the more that you can find ways to do that off your screen, I think it helps a lot more than just your perception of time. Novelty boosts are a really good way to peel yourself away from the phone and find dopamine hits in other places, for sure. But your real journey should be towards regaining control of your attention. We've made it to our final section, talking about attention. We finally learned to slow our minds down a little bit to a much more normal pace instead of being on that constant dopamine roller coaster that social media or short form has us on, finding comfort in the slower life, appreciating details. In the brain rot video that I keep mentioning, they actually brought up a quote by a philosopher named William James, and it says, "My experience is what I agree to attend to. Only those items which I notice shape my mind. Without selective interest, the consciousness of every creature would be a gray, chaotic indiscriminateness, impossible for us to even conceive." So kind of common sense, but there are so many ways to look at the world, so many things to see and experience and dwell upon and care about, and our brains just can't handle that. Like he said, it would be a gray, chaotic indiscriminateness, right? And so because of that, we all have different reality, different priorities, different ways of walking through this crazy life, right? Obviously, there are outside factors that we can't control in our lives, but just thinking of like, where do we put our attention? This idea of selective interest. Actually, a creator named Nina made a really good video about rituals. She talks a lot about attention and like taking time and what is time. And I had never really thought of rituals that way, or rather I didn't realize that my life was made up of a lot of rituals. I just didn't call them that, and so it got me thinking about my daily rituals and the difference I feel when I do them intentionally versus when I don't. And we will talk about that in a second, but I will link her down below. Really great video. But she referenced one Kierkegaard quote that kind of stood out to me and kind of is the reason why I want to stress that novelty boosts and all of that stuff is sort of the gateway to get you to where we want to be. So Kierkegaard writes, "Only the new of which one tires. One never tires of the old, and only a person who does not delude himself that repetition ought to be something new, for then he tires of it, is genuinely happy." What he's basically saying is sometimes there's too much of a good thing. It's sort of like when I just watched People We Meet on Vacation. I liked the book better than the movie, but it's about a girl whose dream was to travel and see the world, and when she became a travel writer, she was living that dream, and then she sort of just got tired of seeing new places all the time, you know? If you can find happiness in things that are consistent in your life, you will be a much happier person, right? If we're constantly chasing novelty to feel like life is worth living, that's not the answer either, right? You can have a kind of dopamine addiction with or without social media. But let's get down to business. Let's talk about attention and how it affects your memory and perception of time. I made a video years ago. This is probably 5 years ago at this point. Talking about aesthetically living. I got a lot of comments, especially during COVID, I think, because where I was living, we really didn't have much lockdown. So I had a lot of friends who had curfews, who couldn't leave their homes, and I was sort of allowed to like go hike without any issues. And so a lot of people came to my channel to see that happening, life outside basically. And I got a lot of comments about how my life was so aesthetically pleasing, and I was just surrounded by really beautiful things, and I was so lucky. And yeah, I agree, Seoul, beautiful city, but a lot of it had to do with the angles in which I was shooting and what I decided to film and focus on. And I think I'm satisfied with how I expressed myself in that video. So I'm going to insert baby Cari here. I think a really good example of that is the quintessential Tumblr post of like a messy bed. If you take a picture of your messy comforter really close up, it's probably gonna look like that Tumblr photo. But if you zoom out and you just show your messy room, it's not gonna look the same. I'm pointing because my room is currently a mess. Please forgive me for sounding corny. This is a very obvious thing. I want to talk about noticing things. Being mindful is literally just paying attention to all of the little details. You can very mindfully drink tea as well. I think we all know the difference between when we're studying, we're in this like mad work rush and we're just like mindlessly chugging coffee, versus sitting really quietly in the morning, you made a nice cup of coffee, you can watch the steam, you can feel the warmth of the cup when you pick it up. You can be mindful all the time. It's a really fun mental exercise. I highly suggest next time you're in the library or maybe you're at work, you find a couple seconds, a break in the action, just sit back and actively try to find something that's really beautiful, whether it's the old book smell or the ironically ugly library carpet, because every library has a really ugly carpet, and really looking for the details. They'll start to come to you naturally, and I think your world will be all the better for it. So yeah, the attention and sort of the importance that we bestow upon something really changes the experience. So like this morning, I bought these brand new drip coffee bags from a coffee shop that I love, but it is like an hour away from my house. And I was so excited for it that this morning I was just paying such close attention to making my cup of coffee. I used my special mug. I am reading a really good book, and so I forgot where I put my phone at one point. I was just sitting on my sofa. I knew I had to get to work in an hour, but I just loving this cup of coffee, like really paying attention to it. And it sort of got me thinking. I remembered I took a tea class, like they were doing a tea ceremony sort of thing, and the teacher had us pour some extra tea onto like a napkin, or maybe it was in a spoon, and she was like, please look at the tea. She was like, we need to consider it in all of its forms, and really just like taking an extra second to consider that thing. Recently, I actually cut my screen time in half. This week doesn't count because I just started a game called Sky Cards. Don't get me into it. I might talk about it in another vlog. This week, screen time abysmal. Don't ask me about it. The last 2 weeks, my screen time has been going down significantly, and I found myself the other day, it was super windy, and I just stared out my window for a long time. I didn't time it, but I just like looked outside and was watching the wind, and I was like people watching, and it was something that I used to do a lot as a kid because my bedroom window faced like the main road, and so I would just watch people skateboarding. I sound creepy, but like I would just stare out my window and watch what was going on, and my brain was quiet and I could just sit and stare. I can genuinely feel when I separate myself from short form content and social media and scrolling and all that jazz, my mind is so much quieter and I can do kind of nothing for a sustained period of time. And that's when I get on my old soapbox. You know what I'm about to say. Be bored, okay? Pay attention. Yes, that being intentional and paying attention absolutely is going to help your memory, help your perception of time, all of that. But what I really want you to do is be comfortable being bored. If you are going to the doctor's office, sit in the waiting room and flip through a magazine, sure, but like you don't need to be on your phone. You don't always need to be doing, analyzing, learning all of these action words. Something that Nina talked about in her video, she was mentioning all of these words like lingering, like dwelling. We really need to hype up the idea of lingering again. Give one thing your attention. You don't need to be doing 20 things at once. Whether it is a photo, a view, a song, try to linger, try to sit with it, try to consider.
Please don't tell me we have to write a paper about it.
Do me a favor. Do yourselves a favor. Stop talking and look. You're not required to write a paper. You're not even required to like it. You are required to consider it.
And so I think I want to end with a quote that I often see misused, particularly by the productivity bros. And we just talked about rituals and routines, and I think we can really easily slip into thinking about productivity. Like, oh, I need to make a new routine for how I'm going to add novelty and intention into my life. If that's what you absolutely need to do, okay, I love a list. But let's just look at this poem together. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who's flung herself out of the grass, the one who's eating the sugar out of my hand, who's moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who's gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last, and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And so you see a lot of people use the very last two lines, which is, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And they sort of use that as inspiration for not quote unquote wasting time. But if you know Miss Mary Oliver, you know she's all about laying in a field, considering the clouds. She's saying that time rolling in the summer grass is certainly not time wasted. And so that was a little discombobulated talk about how much I just want people to look around them and know that we have all of the tools to separate ourselves from something that for the most part isn't adding a whole lot to our lives that we couldn't find somewhere else. Like, you know, I'm somebody who loves a good meme. I love sending funny reels to my friends, absolutely. But I'm talking more about when you start to really rely on it to fill your time, when you have a negative relationship with social media. I really think that in 2026, we're all sort of turning towards being online a little bit less, being a little bit more in the real world. And I just think that that's so important. And I really hope that you have some slow, fulfilling moments. I hope that you can find a lot of beauty in your daily routine. And I hope that you start to remember more. I hope you start to notice more. I hope you start to feel like the days aren't flying away. So yeah, thank you for joining me on this. I still really like making these videos, so if you have any ideas on kind of topics or things that you're struggling with or anything like that, let me know, and I'd love to learn about it and try to talk about it. Once again, thank you so much to Headspace. I will have a QR code and a link in the description box, but you can use that to get 60 days free of Headspace. Please, even if you just need good sounds to fall asleep to. They're doing some really good work on there. So I will leave you here. All the resources that I have and some more that I didn't manage to talk about will be linked down below. And I think this might be my last video before I head to the US. So if you follow me on Instagram or anything and you're going to any kind of book events or something in New York City, I might see you there. Yeah, I'd love to see some of you guys in person. February in New York City. Woo! Thank you for enjoying the full scope of the day with me, and I will see you guys next time. So talk to you then. Okay, bye.